Sheikh Hamdan stood beneath the ink-black sky, his falcon circling overhead like a ghost of warning. His voice was steady, yet filled with a haunting depth, the kind that shakes the soul rather than the earth. This message is not wrapped in roses, nor dipped in honey, he began. It is forged in fire, carved from pain, and soaked in truths no one dared to utter aloud. Tonight, I do not speak as a prince, nor a poet. I speak as a man who has seen too much, felt too deep, and trusted too blindly. The stars held their breath as silence fell like a blade. He paced the dunes, the moon casting his shadow long and stretched, like memories that refused to die. I loved, not wisely, not quietly. I loved in flames, in storms, in ways that set nations whispering, he said, eyes burning with a storm no ocean could calm. But betrayal hides behind the sweetest lips, and silence has teeth. My message tonight is not meant to comfort you. It is meant to awaken you. His words bled into the desert winds like a curse etched on the bones of ancient warriors. I warned you once, softly, with a rose tucked between my words. I said, cherish my heart. Guard it. You wore it like a trophy, then dropped it like dust, he said, voice rising like thunder rolling over the dunes. Now the silence I once endured shall speak, louder than the crowds that cheer my name. You think I'll vanish behind palatial walls? No, I'm the echo that walks your halls at midnight. I'm the question your soul cannot answer. His tone twisted, royal yet raw. He pointed toward the horizon, where darkness kissed the edge of dawn. You danced with wolves, forgetting I am the lion. You drank from poisoned wells, thinking I'd thirst forever. You smiled in my presence and stabbed my shadow behind closed curtains, he declared. This is not bitterness, it's clarity. A terrifying clarity that burns illusions down to ash. His breath hung in the night like frost from fire. I have buried my poetry in silence for too long. But tonight, let my lines scream. Let them claw through your dreams. My every verse is a mirror now. And this mirror does not flatter, he uttered with a blade like sharpness. You loved my crown, not my scars. My voice, not my silence. You loved what the world sees, not what my soul needs. His hands tightened as if holding a ghost he could no longer keep. Make no mistake, this message is for you. And it is terrifying because it is true, he said, eyes flashing like lightning in a storm with no name. I do not wish for revenge, only for reckoning. I do not wish you harm, only the truth to wrap around your nights like chains of ice. He turned to face the desert once more, its vastness echoing his isolation. He lowered his voice, each syllable falling like slow poison. Did you think the prince would always smile? That his poems would always be gardens and gold? No, tonight, I speak from the shadows, where roses rot and truths bleed, he whispered. The man you wronged still breathes. But he no longer waits. He no longer pleads. His lips barely moved, but every word was thunder in disguise. There will be no second warning. This is the final stanza of the poem I never wanted to write. This is the roar behind my grace. This is the fire behind my falcon's wings, he said, pointing to the heavens where the bird still circled. May it fly over your dreams tonight and remind you what you lost when you gambled with love's truest form. A strange silence fell again, heavier than before. I am not afraid of heartbreak. I am afraid of wasting time on those who never meant to stay, he said, letting each word pierce like an arrow. You wore my name like a crown, but you fed my spirit to the wolves. You held my hand, but never my truth. You said forever, but meant until it was hard. The pain in his tone was majestic, sharp and dignified. This terrifying message is my final offering. Not to win you back. Not to shame you. But to show the world that even a poet bleeds. Even a royal heart breaks. Even a lion retreats to heal, but only to return stronger, he declared, the wind now bending to his words. I am not the man you left. I am the fire you ignited, but could not contain. My silence was mercy. My poetry was grace. But now, this message is judgment. Not out of rage, but from revelation, he continued, voice cracking like ice beneath fire. You made me question my worth. My truth. My soul. But tonight, I remember who I am. I am not the echo. I am the voice. Not the hurt. I am the healing. The desert began to hum with ancient power. He closed his eyes, exhaled deeply, then opened them again, piercing and resolute. So remember these lines. Carry them like thorns beneath your silk. When they ask why the poems changed, tell them, he finally spoke the terrifying truth. He finally wrote for himself, not for the one who turned love into a weapon. And with that, Sheikh Hamdan vanished into the night, his words still burning across the sand. The night had not yet surrendered to dawn when Sheikh Hamdan stopped walking. The wind rustled through the palm trees like 1,000 whispers from a time when love still held meaning. He turned back for a moment, not to long for what once was, but to bury it with his own eyes. I am done holding funerals for people who still live, he muttered. And I am done making altars for hearts that never bowed to sincerity. His tone was final, like a door sealed forever without the promise of a return. He stepped into the echo of his own footsteps, each one a symbol of release. I once believed love needed only poetry to survive. I believed loyalty could be taught through gentle acts and unconditional giving. I was wrong, he confessed into the wind. You cannot teach loyalty to someone whose heart is rented by attention and praise. You cannot save someone drowning in their own vanity. He blinked against the tears that refused to fall, for even grief had grown tired of being seen. The falcon cried out above, sharp and distant, like a dagger slicing through clouds. My kingdom is not just of lands and laws, but of soul and silence, he said, looking to the stars that once heard his whispered hopes. You betrayed the kingdom of my heart. You committed treason against the and now, I rise, not to avenge, but to evolve. His voice rang with a new steel, polished by suffering, honed by truth. There was a time when her name tasted like prayer on his tongue, when her laughter filled the empty halls of his soul. Now, it sounded like a warning in every breeze. You thought my forgiveness would always arrive like rain to your drought, but even rain can become a flood, he said, his face carved with resolve. You took my mercy as a weakness, but mercy, when exhausted, births storms you cannot tame. And truly, this was no longer poetry, it was prophecy. He remembered how she used to ask for poems, as though they were gifts instead of lifelines. He gave her verses like a river gives water, endlessly, without asking for a drop in return. I wrote you into my story like a queen, but you scribbled on my soul like I was a page you never intended to keep, he said, each word tasting bitter, like sand and betrayal. You made my name echo in palaces, but you let my love die in silence. And now, that silence speaks louder than any crown you ever craved. The moonlight caught the curve of his jaw as he stared at the desert, vast and unbending. You will not see me broken. You will not find me weeping in corners you abandoned. You will not read another line written to soften your guilt, he vowed. Instead, you will hear of me through the legacy I now chase. One without your shadow. One where my name is not tied to sorrow, but to strength. His words rippled across the sands, a farewell and a fire in one breath. He touched the hilt of his father's dagger, gifted to him as a boy when he first rode alone. This is what I hold now, not your letters, not your lies. I carry truth. I carry self-worth. I carry memories, yes, but no longer as wounds. I wear them now as armor, he declared. Let the world know this. The prince they once saw writing love poems has now begun to write commandments, unbreakable, unshakable, and born from scars. Then he did something he hadn't done in months, he smiled. Not for joy, but for clarity. I feared losing you. I feared the silence. I feared being misunderstood. But now, I fear nothing, he said, voice low but thunderous. Because what could be more terrifying than waking up and realizing you loved someone who never truly saw you? He exhaled slowly, not to release pain, but to claim peace. I built a kingdom in my soul and offered you the throne, he continued, the breeze tugging at his robe like fate begging him to move forward. But you mistook my kindness for currency. You spent my love like gold and blamed me when it ran dry. Tell me, what will you do when you seek warmth and find only echoes? What will you do when you realize the only man who truly saw you has turned away, for good? The fire in his eyes said more than his words ever could. Sheikh Hamdan paused, Look to the sky where stars whispered of new beginnings. This message isn't just for you. It's for anyone who wears deception like perfume. It's for anyone who sees vulnerability as weakness. It's for the world that forgets even royals cry in silence, he declared. Let this message terrify, not because of its anger, but because of its honesty. Truth, after all, is the scariest thing to those who hide behind illusion. He raised his hand, letting sand pour through his fingers like the time he would no longer waste. I do not curse you, he said quietly. I simply erase you, from my nights, from my poems, from the palace of my peace. And as the last grain slipped through, he turned his back on the memories, leaving them buried in the dunes, where even the wind would no longer sing their names. As dawn finally crept across the sky, Sheikh Hamdan stood taller than ever. The terrifying message had been spoken, not to haunt, but to heal. Not to destroy, but to declare. And in the quiet glow of morning, a new verse began, written for no one but himself. This was the rebirth of the poet, the roar of the prince, and the soul of the man who would never again be silenced. In the very last second, after everything fades to darkness, a heartbeat plays, just one. That is yours. The one that once lay against my chest and told me we were real. That singular sound is more than a note, it's the pulse of our entire history. I recorded it the night you fell asleep beside me and didn't know I had pressed my hand to your heart. I kept it all these years. And now, it ends the video, because your heartbeat was always the beginning and the end of everything for me. They will never know what it cost me to make this. To gather the fragments of us, to edit them into a story I could finally share with the world. But I didn't do it for their approval. I did it because I couldn't go another day knowing your name remained unspoken, uncelebrated, untouched. So I've immortalized it. In golden letters, in sacred pauses, in trembling poems. And if the world forgets it tomorrow, I won't. Not in this life.